0745 hours, April 7th, 1945. Major Richard Bong's gloved hands grip the control stick of his P-51 Mustang at 28,000 feet, 43 miles southeast of Tokyo Bay. The Packard Merlin engine thrumming beneath him with a deep mechanical growl that reverberates through his chest cavity. The fuel gauge reads 3/4 full, 720 gallons of high-octane aviation gasoline sloshing in the drop tanks bolted beneath his wings. Enough range to fly 1,500 miles if the navigation tables are correct. If the weather holds. If the Japanese don't figure out what's happening until it's too late. He adjusts the mixture control, feeling the engine's response through the throttle quadrant, remembering the sneers from the mechanics back at Northfield on Guam when they first saw the Mustangs being crated for shipment. European theater junk, they called them. No fighter can escort bombers that far in the Pacific. The Army Air Force's brass had their doubts too. Colonel McKnight himself had pulled Bong aside 3 weeks ago, tapping the mission plan with his index finger, shaking his head. "Dick, this is experimental. The Japanese think these birds are toys. Hell, maybe they're right." The radio crackles in his headset, Baker Flight reporting contact with the B-29 formation 30 miles ahead, the superfortresses maintaining course at 25,000 feet toward the Nakajima aircraft plant, their contrails streaming like chalk lines across the morning sky. Bong banks left, scanning the horizon through his gun sight. The .650 caliber Browning machine guns loaded with 400 rounds per gun, the ammunition belts fed through the wing roots into the firing chambers. The Japanese pilots he'd read about in intelligence briefings, Lieutenant Colonel Nara Tetsuzo and his 244th Air Regiment, they'd been quoted in intercepted communications calling the Mustang adequate for short-range work, unsuitable for Pacific distances. Tetsuzo himself had dismissed American long-range fighter capability as technically impossible given fuel consumption rates and combat loading requirements. Movement at 2 o'clock high. 3 silver specks climbing fast from the direction of Honshu, contrails forming behind them as they gain altitude, their wings catching sunlight as they bank into an intercept course. Nakajima Key 84. Hayates. Bong identifies from the silhouette recognition cards burned into his memory, fast, maneuverable, designed specifically for homeland defense. The lead aircraft is closing at 420 miles per hour. Its cowling painted with the rising sun insignia, the pilot inside probably radioing his base right now, reporting contact with American fighters at impossible range from any known Allied airfield. Bong pushes the throttle forward, feeling the Merlin respond with a surge of power that drives him back into his seat, the airspeed indicator climbing past 400 miles per hour as he angles toward the approaching Hayats, abandoning the standard doctrine that says fighters stay with the bombers, that escorts never leave their charges unprotected. The new strategy demands aggression. Meet the interceptors head-on, break their formation before they can coordinate an attack on the B-29s. Prove that American fighters can reach out and touch targets the Japanese thought were safe behind 1,500 miles of ocean. The range closes to 800 yards. The lead Hayate's wings sparkle with muzzle flashes as its pilot opens fire, 20mm cannon shells arcing through the air between them, bright tracers marking their trajectory. Bong jinks right, then left, feeling the G-forces press against his ribs as he pulls the stick back, climbing into the vertical, the Mustang's superior power-to-weight ratio carrying him above the Japanese fighter's firing solution. He rolls inverted at the top of his climb, pulling the nose through until the Hayate fills his gun sight ring, the pilot's cockpit visible through the armored glass windscreen, the man inside probably realizing for the first time that an American fighter is operating at combat radius deeper than any mission planners in Tokyo thought possible. Bong's thumb finds the firing button on his stick grip, depresses it, and 6 streams of .50 caliber bullets converge on the Hayate's engine, cowling at a rate of 800 rounds per minute. The Japanese fighter's propeller stops turning. Smoke streams from its engine compartment. The aircraft rolls right and begins its dive toward the Pacific, trailing black exhaust and burning aviation fuel. The strategy works. But 60 miles ahead, over Tokyo itself, the sky is filling with interceptors. The second Hayate explodes in a ball of orange flame at 26,000 feet, its pilot never seeing the burst of .50 caliber rounds that shredded his fuel tank 3 seconds after Bong's wingman, Lieutenant William Williams, lined up the shot from 600 yards out. Williams banks hard left, his Mustang's airframe groaning under 4 Gs of turning force as he scans for the third interceptor, the one that broke formation and dove for the deck when the engagement started. probably radioing Tokyo with the impossible news that American fighters are operating at full combat effectiveness 1,500 miles from their nearest known base. Captain Don Loper's voice crackles through the radio from Baker Flight, 2 miles north and closing on the B-29 formation. Bandits climbing from the southwest, count 6, maybe 8 Raiden interceptors at Angels 22. His Mustang is burning fuel at 95 gallons per hour at combat power settings. The external drop tanks already jettisoned over the Pacific to reduce drag and increase maneuverability, but the internal tanks still hold enough aviation gasoline to maintain combat, operations for another 3 hours and 47 minutes by his calculations, longer than any Japanese pilot expects an American fighter to remain in their airspace. The Mitsubishi J-2M Raiden fighters climb toward the bomber stream with their distinctive barrel-shaped fuselages and broad wings, each aircraft powered by a Kasei radial engine producing 1,820 horsepower, enough to push them to 371 miles per hour in level flight. The Japanese pilots inside those cockpits are looking at gauges that tell them they're facing an impossibility. Enemy fighters operating at maximum range from Iwo Jima, 850 miles of ocean between them and the nearest American airfield, carrying enough fuel and ammunition to engage in sustained air combat over Tokyo itself. Bong rolls his Mustang inverted and pulls the nose through until he's diving at a 45-degree angle toward the Raiden formation, the airspeed indicator climbing past 430 miles per hour as gravity and engine power combine to accelerate his aircraft beyond its normal cruise speed. The Packard Merlin engine howls at maximum manifold pressure, supercharger whining as it forces high-pressure air into the combustion chambers, every mechanical system in the fighter operating at its designed limits, while maintaining the precise tolerances that keep it airborne at combat weight. The lead Raiden pilot sees him coming and breaks formation, pulling his fighter into a climbing left turn that reveals the tactical mistake Japanese intelligence made when they assessed the Mustang's capabilities based on European theater performance reports. In the confined airspace over France and Germany, the P-51 operated as a short to medium-range escort fighter, rarely flying more than 400 miles from its base, never demonstrating the full extent of its operational radius when configured with maximum fuel capacity and optimized for Pacific distances. Williams follows Bong into the diving attack, both Mustangs maintaining formation integrity while engaging targets that Japanese air defense planners assumed would never appear in their sector of responsibility. The Raiden pilots scatter, abandoning their coordinated assault on the B-29 formation as they find themselves fighting for survival against fighters that shouldn't exist at this range, at this time, in this airspace. Loper's guns spark to life as he closes on a Raiden from below and behind, the .650 caliber Brownings firing in sequence to maintain barrel temperature and ammunition expenditure rates, each gun cycling at 800 rounds per minute, the bullets converging at the point in space where his gun sight predicted the enemy aircraft would be based on its speed, altitude, and direction of flight. The Raiden's port wing disintegrates under the concentrated fire, hydraulic fluid and aviation fuel streaming from severed lines as the Japanese fighter rolls right and begins its death spiral toward the industrial districts below. The radio frequency fills with Japanese voices as pilots report contact with American fighters at impossible range, their transmissions intercepted by Allied listening posts on Iwo Jima and Saipan, intelligence officers frantically translating the shocked reports of enemy fighters operating with full combat effectiveness over the Japanese home islands. Lieutenant Colonel Nara Tetsuzo's voice cuts through the chatter from his command post at Chofu Airfield, ordering immediate scramble of all available interceptors, demanding confirmation of the American fighter's range and fuel state, trying to process tactical information that contradicts every assessment his staff has made about Allied long-range fighter capabilities. By 0823 hours, 14 minutes after the first engagement, the sky over Tokyo contains 37 Japanese interceptors climbing toward the bomber formation and 17 American P-51 Mustangs maintaining escort positions with enough fuel remaining to conduct combat operations for another 2 hours and 51 minutes. The mathematical reality of the Mustang's operational radius has shifted the tactical balance in the Pacific theater, transforming B-29 operations from vulnerable, unescorted bombing runs into coordinated strikes protected by fighters, operating at full effectiveness deep inside Japanese airspace. The Nakajima aircraft plant below takes direct hits from the superfortress's bomb loads at 0827 hours, high explosive charges detonating in precise patterns across the production facilities, while Mustang pilots engage the remaining interceptors at altitudes between 22,000 and 31,000 feet. Williams shoots down his second Raiden of the mission, watching the enemy fighter spiral into Tokyo Bay, trailing smoke and burning fuel. Its pilot probably still trying to understand how American fighters reached his sector, with enough ammunition and fuel to dominate the engagement. The formation turns southeast for the long flight back to Iwo Jima, leaving behind a Japanese air defense system that must now account for the presence of long-range American fighters anywhere within 1,500 miles of Allied island bases. The element of surprise is gone forever. Lieutenant Colonel Nara Tetsuzo studies the tactical situation board in his command bunker at Chofu Airfield on the morning of May 15th, 43 red pins marking confirmed American fighter contacts over Tokyo in the past 38 days, each pin representing a fundamental failure of Japanese air defense doctrine that assumed no enemy fighter could maintain combat effectiveness at ranges exceeding 800 miles from its base. His intelligence officers have calculated fuel consumption rates, ammunition loads, and operational endurance for the P-51 Mustang based on captured technical manuals and pilot interrogations, arriving at the inescapable conclusion that American fighters are now operating with impunity throughout the airspace his command was designed to protect. The morning briefing reveals 47 Allied bombing missions escorted by long-range fighters since the first Mustang appearance over the capital, each raid protected by aircraft that Japanese pilots initially dismissed as European theater novelties unsuited for Pacific operations. Tetsuzo's staff has documented engagement patterns, noting how American fighter pilots abandoned traditional escort doctrine to engage interceptors aggressively, clearing flight paths for the B-29 formations with tactics that prioritize offensive action over defensive positioning. The strategic implications cut through every assumption about Allied operational limitations in the Pacific theater. His telephone rings at 0947 hours with reports of incoming radar contacts approaching from the southeast, multiple formations at high altitude maintaining course toward Tokyo Bay, the signature electronic profile matching previous B-29 strikes with P-51 escorts operating at full combat radius. Tetsuzo orders immediate scramble of 63 interceptors from 3 airfields, concentrating his most experienced pilots in a coordinated response designed to overwhelm the American fighters through sheer numerical superiority, forcing them to expend ammunition and fuel in prolonged engagement while Japanese reserves climb to attack altitude. Major Bong receives the tactical update from his flight leader at 29,000 feet, 68 miles southeast of Tokyo, his Mustang carrying full internal fuel and 400 rounds per gun, enough combat endurance to maintain air superiority over the target area for 2 hours and 34 minutes, if fuel consumption remains within calculated parameters. The radio intercepts indicate massive Japanese response launching from multiple bases, more interceptors than his squadron has faced in any single engagement, pilots climbing to altitude with explicit orders to destroy the American fighters, regardless of losses to their own forces. The trap reveals itself at 0:10:18 hours when Japanese fighters appear simultaneously from 3 vectors, climbing from airfields at Chofu, Narimasu, and Shiroi in a coordinated assault that forces the Mustang formation into defensive maneuvering while the B-29 stream continues toward its primary target at the Mitsubishi aircraft plant in Nagoya. Tetsuzo's pilots execute the ambush with precision timing, using altitude advantage and numerical superiority to split the American fighters from their bombers, creating the tactical situation Japanese air commanders have planned since the first Mustang appeared over their territory. Williams finds himself alone at 27,000 feet, separated from his wingman by the initial Japanese attack, facing force. Nakajima Kai 84. Fighters closing from different altitudes and bearings, their pilots coordinating radio communications to maintain formation integrity while executing the encirclement maneuver that Japanese doctrine prescribes for outnumbered enemy formations. His fuel gauge reads 643 gallons remaining, enough for sustained combat operations, but the ammunition counters show expenditure rates that will exhaust his guns in 11 minutes of continuous firing if the engagement maintains its current intensity. The lead Ki-84 opens fire at 800 yards, 20mm cannon shells tracking across the sky in lazy arcs that Williams avoids through violent maneuvering, pulling his Mustang through a climbing spiral that uses the aircraft's superior power-to-weight ratio to maintain energy while evading the coordinated attack from multiple directions. The Japanese pilots press their assault with disciplined formation flying, maintaining radio contact while executing bracket attacks designed to force the American fighter into increasingly desperate evasive maneuvers that will exhaust his fuel and ammunition reserves. Loper's voice cuts through the radio chatter from his position 3 miles north, reporting engagement with 7 Japanese interceptors while providing cover for able flight's withdrawal from the target area. his Mustang's guns cycling through ammunition at maximum rate of fire as he attempts to break up a concentrated attack on two damaged B-29s, struggling to maintain altitude with shot-out engines and hydraulic systems. The tactical situation deteriorates as Japanese pilots coordinate their attacks, using numerical advantage to force American fighters into individual duels, while the bomber formation continues toward Nagoya without adequate escort coverage. Williams rolls inverted and dives through the Japanese formation, his airspeed building past 450 miles per hour as he uses gravity and engine power to escape the encirclement, the Ki-84 pilots following him into the dive while maintaining formation discipline that prevents mutual interference during the pursuit phase. His gun sight tracks across the canopy of the trailing Japanese fighter, range closing to 400 yards, as both aircraft accelerate through the vertical maneuver. The Mustang's structural advantage in high-speed flight allowing it to maintain control authority, while the enemy formation struggles with flutter and vibration at maximum velocity. The burst lasts 2 3/4 seconds. 6 streams of 50 caliber bullets converging on the Ki-84's engine compartment and cockpit area, the Japanese fighter disintegrating under concentrated fire as hydraulic fluid and aviation fuel spray from severed systems, the aircraft rolling left and entering an uncontrolled spin that carries it toward the industrial districts below Tokyo Bay. Williams pulls out of his dive at 18,000 feet, climbing back toward the engagement area where the remaining Japanese fighters regroup for another coordinated assault. Bong's formation destroys 11 enemy aircraft in the engagement while losing 7 Mustangs to concentrated Japanese attacks, the tactical exchange favoring American pilots, who maintain superior aircraft performance and gunnery training despite facing numerical disadvantage in their first encounter with coordinated Japanese defensive tactics. The B-29 formation completes its bombing run without losses, protected by fighters operating at maximum combat radius deep inside enemy airspace. The trap claims heavy casualties from both sides, but the strategic balance remains unchanged. American fighters continue operating with impunity over Japanese territory, while enemy air defenses struggle to adapt to the reality of long-range escort operations that Japanese intelligence dismissed as technically impossible until Mustangs appeared over Tokyo with full combat loads. The tactical breakthrough arrives on June 2nd when Captain Loper leads 16 Mustangs in the first independent fighter sweep over Osaka Bay, operating without bomber escort for the first time since the campaign began. His aircraft configured with maximum internal fuel and reduced ammunition loads to extend operational radius beyond the 1,500-mile barrier that Japanese air defense planners still consider the absolute limit of American fighter range. His formation climbs to 32,000 feet over the inland sea, maintaining radio silence while navigating by dead reckoning toward the Kure Naval Arsenal, where Japanese intelligence reports indicate no enemy fighters have appeared since the war began. The fuel calculations work perfectly. Each Mustang burns 87 gallons per hour at cruise power settings, leaving sufficient reserves for 43 minutes of combat operations over the target area before beginning the return flight to Iwo Jima, enough time to engage any interceptors while conducting reconnaissance of Japanese naval facilities that Allied bombers have never reached due to the absence of adequate fighter escort. Loper's airspeed indicator holds steady at 294 miles per hour as his formation approaches the Japanese coast, every pilot maintaining precise navigation and fuel management to achieve tactical surprise over targets the enemy considers beyond American reach. The radio crackles with Japanese transmissions as coastal radar stations detect the incoming formation, ground controllers frantically coordinating scramble orders for interceptors based at airfields throughout the Kansai region, pilots climbing toward intercept altitude, while calculating engagement parameters for enemy fighters operating at impossible range from any known Allied base. Lieutenant General Hideyoshi Obata receives the contact reports at his headquarters in Tokyo, studying tactical displays that show American fighters penetrating Japanese airspace with apparent fuel reserves for sustained combat operations, a capability his staff assessed as technically unfeasible based on captured P-51 specifications and European theater performance data. Loper's formation reaches the Kure Arsenal at 0:11:37 hours, circling the naval facility at maximum altitude while Japanese anti-aircraft batteries open fire with 88mm guns, black puffs of exploding ordnance bursting below the Mustangs as they conduct photographic reconnaissance of destroyer and cruiser construction facilities that American intelligence has never observed from the air. The tactical advantage is overwhelming, 16 fighters operating with complete impunity over one of Japan's most heavily defended naval installations, gathering intelligence while demonstrating American capability to project air power anywhere within 1,500 miles of captured Pacific Islands. The first interceptors appear at 11:41 hours, 8 Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters climbing from Iwakuni Airfield with insufficient altitude to engage the American formation effectively, their pilots struggling to reach combat altitude while the Mustangs maintain tactical advantage through superior positioning and fuel reserves. Loper selects his targets methodically, diving from 32,000 feet with his wingman in trail formation, both aircraft accelerating past 400 miles per hour as they close on the lead Zero from above and behind. The Japanese pilot unaware of the attack until 50 caliber bullets begin impacting his aircraft's engine cowling and wing roots. The Zero explodes in a ball of orange flame, its fuel tanks detonating under concentrated machine gun fire as Loper pulls out of his attack dive and climbs back to altitude, his ammunition counters showing 372 rounds remaining per gun, enough firepower for multiple engagements during the remaining combat time over the target area. Williams destroys a second Zero with a deflection shot from 600 yards, his burst severing the Japanese fighter's control cables and sending it into an uncontrolled spin toward Hiroshima Bay, the pilot bailing out at 8,000 feet while his aircraft disintegrates under the stress of terminal velocity. The tactical implications reshape Pacific air warfare doctrine as Mustang formations begin operating independently of bomber escorts, conducting fighter sweeps over Japanese industrial targets with sufficient range and endurance to engage any interceptors while gathering intelligence for future B-29 missions. Obata's staff calculates American fighter coverage, extending to every major city on Honshu, Kyushu, and Shikoku, eliminating the concept of secure airspace within the Japanese home islands, enforcing complete revision of defensive strategies that assumed enemy fighters could never reach beyond an 800-mile radius. From Allied bases. By June 15th, Mustang pilots have flown 51 very long-range missions over Japanese territory, destroying 206 confirmed enemy aircraft while conducting reconnaissance and ground attack operations that Japanese air defenses cannot prevent or effectively counter. The tactical balance shifted permanently in favor of American forces operating with complete air superiority throughout the Pacific theater. Bong leads formation after formation over targets that enemy pilots considered unreachable, his aircraft routinely operating at combat effectiveness 1,500 miles from base while maintaining ammunition and fuel reserves sufficient for sustained engagement with any interceptors that dare to challenge American air superiority. The Katori Naval Arsenal takes direct hits from Mustang ground attack missions on June 18th, 20mm cannon shells and 500-pound bombs destroying dock facilities and damaging 3 destroyers under construction, the first time Japanese naval targets have suffered attack by single-engine fighters operating at maximum range from Allied island bases. The psychological impact matches the tactical achievement. Japanese workers witness American fighters conducting precision attacks over facilities their government assured them were beyond enemy reach, the visible proof of Allied air superiority undermining civilian morale and military confidence throughout the home islands. Sasebo Shipyard burns under Mustang cannon fire on June 21st, the attack coordinated with B-29 bombing missions that arrive precisely on schedule while P-51 fighters suppress anti-aircraft defenses and engage interceptors attempting to disrupt the bombing runs. The coordination achieves tactical perfection, long-range fighters and heavy bombers operating together over Japanese territory with complete freedom of action, every mission demonstrating American capability to project devastating air power throughout the enemy's home territory, regardless of distance from Allied bases or strength of Japanese defensive preparations. The operational statistics accumulate with relentless precision throughout the month. 75% of all Mustang kills in the Pacific theater occur during very long-range missions over Japanese territory, American pilots achieving air superiority ratios that exceed European theater performance while operating under conditions Japanese intelligence considered impossible for single-engine fighters. The strategic advantage becomes absolute as enemy air defenses collapse under sustained pressure from fighters that appear anywhere, anytime, with sufficient fuel and ammunition to dominate every engagement. The morning of July 4th finds Lieutenant Colonel Nara Tetsuzo standing in the ruins of his operations center at Chofu Airfield, studying damage assessment reports that document the systematic destruction of Japanese air defense. Capabilities throughout the Kanto region, his remaining interceptor force reduced to 37 operational aircraft from the 123 fighters he commanded when American long-range operations began 3 months earlier. The tactical situation board shows red markers indicating confirmed P-51 presence over every major industrial target within 200 miles of Tokyo, enemy fighters operating with complete freedom of action, while his pilots struggle to maintain even-token resistance against formations that appear with clockwork regularity at altitudes and ranges. Japanese air doctrine considered impossible for single-engine aircraft. Major Bong leads 43 Mustangs over Tokyo Bay at 0726 hours. His formation maintaining combat air patrol at 29,000 feet, while 312 B-29 superfortresses approach their primary targets at the Kawasaki aircraft plant and Mitsubishi Heavy Industries complex, the largest coordinated bombing mission of the Pacific War, protected by fighters that Japanese pilots no longer attempt to intercept in meaningful numbers. His fuel gauges show sufficient reserves for 2 hours and 51 minutes of combat operations, enough endurance to engage any remaining enemy aircraft while providing continuous cover for the bomber stream during its approach, attack, and withdrawal phases. The radio frequencies remain eerily quiet as the formation crosses into Japanese airspace. No interceptor communications detected by Allied listening posts. No radar-directed scramble orders issued from surviving Japanese command centers. The absence of enemy response indicating complete collapse of organized air defense throughout the Tokyo metropolitan area. Williams scans the horizon through his gun sight, searching for the silver glints of climbing interceptors that marked previous missions over the capital, finding only empty sky and the contrails of Allied aircraft operating without opposition over targets that 3 months earlier were considered beyond the reach of American fighter escort. Captain Loper's flight provides high cover for the B-29 formations as they begin their bombing runs over the Kawasaki plant, his Mustangs circling at 31,000 feet, while anti-aircraft batteries engage the bombers with increasingly desperate fire. Black bursts of 88mm shells exploding among the superfortresses as ground gunners attempt to disrupt attacks they cannot prevent through fighter interception. The tactical advantage is absolute, American bombers operating with complete fighter protection over Japanese industrial targets, while enemy air forces remain grounded due to fuel shortages, pilot losses, and the inability to contest airspace dominated by long-range escorts. The first explosions bloom across the Kawasaki facility at 0743 hours, 500-pound general-purpose bombs detonating in precise patterns. Throughout the aircraft production complex, while Mustang pilots maintain overwatch positions, their presence eliminating any possibility of Japanese fighter interference during the most vulnerable phase of the bombing mission. Loper watches the industrial buildings collapse under concentrated bombardment, noting the absence of enemy interceptors that would have swarmed over such a target during the early months of the campaign, when Japanese pilots still believed they could defend their homeland against American air attacks. Tetsuzo receives fragmentary reports from his surviving airfield commanders throughout the morning, each transmission documenting further degradation of Japanese air defense capabilities, as fuel shortages and pilot attrition reduce interceptor availability to levels that cannot support sustained operations against American formations, numbering in the hundreds of aircraft. His meteorological section reports favorable flying weather extending through the next 72 hours, conditions that will permit continued Allied bombing operations while Japanese forces lack sufficient aircraft and trained pilots to contest American air superiority over any target within range of Mustang escorts. The second wave of B-29s approaches the Mitsubishi complex at 0817 hours. 97 superfortresses escorted by 31 Mustangs operating at maximum combat radius with sufficient fuel reserves for extended engagement with any interceptors that attempt to disrupt the bombing mission, their presence over Tokyo demonstrating complete American dominance of Japanese airspace throughout the home islands. Bong's formation maintains formation integrity while conducting reconnaissance of potential targets for future missions, noting the absence of enemy fighter activity that characterized earlier operations when Japanese pilots still possessed aircraft and fuel to contest Allied penetration of their defensive perimeter. Williams destroys the last Japanese interceptor over Tokyo at 0829 hours, a solitary Nakajima Ki-84 that climbs desperately toward the bomber formation before succumbing to concentrated .50 caliber fire from 3 Mustangs converging on its position. The enemy pilot's final transmission cut short as his aircraft disintegrates under sustained machine gun attack. The engagement lasts 17 seconds, demonstrating the tactical hopelessness of individual Japanese fighters attempting to engage American formations that operate with complete numerical and technological superiority throughout the theater of operations. The bombing missions continue without interruption through the remainder of July, American aircraft operating over Japanese targets with the same tactical freedom Allied forces enjoyed over Germany during the final months of the European War, enemy air defenses reduced to ineffective anti-aircraft fire and occasional harassment attacks by individual fighters that pose no meaningful threat to formations protected by long-range escorts. Obata's headquarters issues orders for conservation of remaining aircraft and fuel, acknowledging the impossibility of contesting American air superiority while attempting to preserve some minimal defensive capability for the anticipated invasion of the home islands. By July 28th, Mustang formations have flown over Japanese territory for 123 consecutive days, accumulating operational statistics that redefine the tactical parameters of Pacific air warfare while demonstrating American capability to project decisive air power throughout the enemy's homeland, regardless of distance from Allied bases or strength of Japanese defensive preparations. The strategic implications extend beyond immediate military considerations as civilian morale collapses under sustained bombing campaigns protected by fighters that appear over any target at any time with sufficient fuel and ammunition to ensure mission success. The final tally emerges through intelligence analysis conducted throughout August. 206 confirmed Japanese aircraft destroyed by Mustang pilots operating at very long range, 75% of all P-51 kills achieved in the Pacific theater, tactical dominance established over every major industrial target within 1,500 miles of Allied island bases. The war's conclusion becomes inevitable as Japanese leadership confronts the reality of complete American air superiority over their homeland, enforced by fighters that transformed impossible missions into routine operations through superior range, endurance, and combat effectiveness. The surrender ceremony unfolds aboard the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay on September 2, 1945, while Major Bong stands on the flight deck of the carrier Essex 5 miles to the east, watching P-51 Mustangs from the 7th Air Force conduct continuous combat air patrols over the assembled Allied fleet, their presence a visible reminder of the air superiority that forced Japan's capitulation after 4 months of unopposed operations over the home islands. His logbook records 137 very long-range missions flown since April 7th, each sortie demonstrating capabilities that Japanese intelligence dismissed as technically impossible until American fighters began appearing over Tokyo with full combat loads and sufficient fuel reserves for sustained engagement with any interceptors brave enough to challenge their dominance. Lieutenant Colonel Nara Tetsuzo observes the ceremony from his detention cell at Sugamo Prison, reading translated copies of American after-action reports that document the systematic destruction of Japanese air defenses by fighters operating at ranges his staff calculated as beyond the operational limits of single-engine aircraft configured for Pacific theater missions. The tactical analyses reveal engagement statistics that contradict every assessment Japanese air doctrine made about Allied long-range fighter capabilities. 206 confirmed kills achieved by Mustang pilots flying missions exceeding 1,500 miles from their bases, combat effectiveness maintained throughout operations that Japanese planners assumed would exhaust American fuel and ammunition reserves before reaching meaningful targets. Captain Loper files his final mission report on September 15th, documenting 4 months and 11 days of continuous operations over Japanese territory, during which his squadron flew 89 very long-range sorties without losing a single aircraft to fuel exhaustion or mechanical failure related to extended-range configuration, the maintenance records proving that American industrial capacity could produce fighters capable of sustained combat operations at distances Japanese engineers considered impossible for aircraft designed during the 1930s. His personal kill tally reaches 17 confirmed enemy aircraft destroyed during long-range missions, each victory achieved while operating at combat radius that exceeded the maximum theoretical range Japanese intelligence attributed to the P-51 Mustang. The strategic implications reshape post-war aviation development as American aircraft manufacturers analyze performance data from Pacific theater operations, noting how the Mustang's combination of range, speed, and firepower established tactical parameters that influence fighter design requirements throughout the emerging Cold War period. Engineers at North American Aviation study fuel consumption charts and engine performance curves that document sustained operations at ranges previously considered impossible, incorporating lessons learned from very long-range missions into specifications for jet-powered fighters that will dominate aerial combat during the next decade of military aviation development. Williams receives his Distinguished Flying Cross on October 3rd, the citation specifically mentioning his role in proving American capability to project decisive air power throughout the Pacific Basin, using single-engine fighters equipped with auxiliary fuel systems that extended operational radius beyond every estimate Japanese air defense planners used when calculating defensive requirements for the home islands. His combat record includes 23 confirmed kills achieved during long-range missions, each engagement demonstrating superior American training, equipment, and tactical doctrine against enemy pilots who never adapted to the reality of sustained fighter operations at impossible distances from Allied bases. Japanese aviation engineers conduct post-war analysis of captured P-51 technical specifications, comparing actual performance data with pre-war assessments that dismissed American long-range fighter development as impractical for Pacific operations, their calculations revealing fundamental errors in fuel consumption estimates and operational endurance projections that allowed Japanese air commanders to assume their homeland remained beyond effective range of enemy single-engine aircraft. The technical evaluation acknowledges superior American engineering in auxiliary fuel systems, engine efficiency, and airframe design that achieved tactical capabilities Japanese industry could not match despite 4 years of wartime development focused on interceptor aircraft optimized for homeland defense. The final statistics emerged through comprehensive analysis conducted by Allied intelligence services throughout the autumn of 1945. 75% of all Mustang kills in the Pacific Theater occurred during very long-range missions over Japanese territory, American pilots achieving air superiority ratios that exceeded European theater performance while operating under conditions enemy commanders considered impossible for single-engine fighters. The operational success rate approaches 100% for missions protected by P-51 escorts, demonstrating complete tactical dominance over Japanese air defenses that collapsed under sustained pressure from fighters appearing anywhere within 1,500 miles of Allied island bases. Tetsuzo writes his final intelligence assessment from Sugamo Prison on November 20th, acknowledging the fundamental failure of Japanese air doctrine to anticipate American long-range fighter capabilities that transformed Pacific air warfare during the final months of the conflict. His analysis identifies specific miscalculations in fuel consumption estimates, operational radius projections, and combat endurance assessments that allowed Japanese planners to assume their industrial targets remained secure behind distance barriers that American technology overcame through superior engineering and tactical innovation. The document concludes with reluctant recognition of Mustang superiority in every category of fighter performance that mattered during sustained operations over enemy territory. The legacy crystallizes through post-war aviation history as the P-51 Mustang becomes the standard against which all future long-range fighters are measured, its Pacific theater performance establishing tactical doctrines that influence air combat development throughout the jet age and beyond. Military academies study very long-range mission profiles as examples of how technological advantage combined with superior training can overcome seemingly impossible operational requirements. The Mustang's success over Japan serving as a case study in air power projection that remains relevant decades after the war's conclusion. By December 1945, aircraft production lines at North American Aviation shift to advanced fighter designs, incorporating lessons learned from Pacific theater operations. Engineers applying performance data from very long-range missions to specifications for jet-powered aircraft that will maintain American air superiority throughout the Cold War period. The Mustang's operational achievements over Japan established design parameters for range, endurance, and combat effectiveness that influence fighter development for the next generation of military aviation, proving that American industrial capacity could produce aircraft capable of decisive tactical impact at any distance from home bases.